"You are mine," he said. "You do what I say and you don't question me." And that was the end of the conversation. I sat there, stunned. Who was this man? And where was the loving man I fell in love with? The one who had showered me with gifts and affection, the one who promised me we would get married and travel the world together. He had promised me a good-paying job and that I would get paid daily to get out of the financial hole I was in when he met me. He had painted a picture of the future I could have with my children, that I would no longer have to struggle to provide for them. What had I done wrong? These days, all he wanted to hear was how much money I had made that day and if I had posted my photos and answered messages from customers. He was angry and cold. Does that sound like the beginning of a book? Well, it's not. It was the beginning of a nightmare.
I started as a federal law enforcement agent with the FBI, and as you can imagine, in a job like that, you get involved in all kinds of different types of criminal investigations and operations. So I had several things throughout my career, different kidnapping cases of children, different labor trafficking situations where we had foreign nationals being trafficked, and then probably one of the more impressionistic situations that I had was some child exploitation situations that left a huge impression on me.
It's horrible. $150 billion a year was what was estimated in 2022 is generated by human trafficking. And that was another reason in the background that I chose to do what I wanted to do, because at that point in time, I had spent my entire life looking out for people, helping people, protecting people, and it felt almost like I hadn't accomplished anything at 35 years old.
I remember sitting in my office with my boss and mentor, and I would say, when are we going to get back to fighting crime? Like, I'm spending my days writing policy. And at that time, I felt like I lost that sense of me from growing up and why I got into this. And I was just trying to just write these things just to make someone else happy so that the institution didn't get in trouble.
Human beings aren't connected anymore. We don't reach out to each other physically. We don't have that sort of bond with each other, that understanding that we're all human beings. We all share the same space. We all breathe the same oxygen. We've been segmented, divided so many times that we've lost that connection. And that has ultimately led to people being able to look at a human being and not see a human being, see an item for sale, for use.
And it could be anybody. If we have 50 million people in slavery today, 2024, it's kind of 1 in 125 or something like that. How many people do you meet every day when you commute, in your school, in your work, in your city? How many of them might be exploited? It's about people, and it's everywhere.
Anyone can become a victim of human trafficking. What we like to refer to is the perfect storm. And this is a combination of life circumstances, vulnerabilities, social environments that come together to create a space where an individual has no option other than to sell or trade sex.
I've asked people, I've asked my own family members. Most people don't know what it means. They don't know what human trafficking really is, and they don't know what the signs are.
We have sex trafficking. I think that's the most common that people do recognize and know, that human trafficking equals sex trafficking often. But there are so many other things. Labor trafficking, which is very often overlooked. Then we have exploitation for forced criminality, with drugs involved, minors, child sexual exploitation, trafficking for organ harvesting, forced marriage, child soldiers, you name it.
Victims and traffickers can be difficult to identify one from the other because sometimes traffickers have come from a place of being the victim and ultimately gained control, relative control over their life by perpetrating against others. And also a lot of the actual actions are carried out by the victim rather than the trafficker.
The victims of human trafficking are often being held by threat to family members and others, and they're very afraid to say anything. And therefore they might be in public, and yet they don't give any indication that they're being held against their will, and it's unfortunate. So oftentimes it goes on around us, we don't even know it, we're unaware of it.
The communities in which we operate are, in some cases, countries of origin, or countries of transit, or countries of destination for the victims of human trafficking. And so it's very important to us that we serve those communities properly by tackling the problem close to source. So we train our staff to recognize those signs, we train our staff to intervene when they find it, and we will work with our clients if we find that they are unwittingly involved in that sort of activity as well.
You know, us as individuals who know the space can individually train people in our life that aren't exposed to this as much, that aren't coming to an ACAMS conference or a different financial crimes conference to learn those things. But then it takes a societal change of things that we need to as a society think about. The federal government has, for example, National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. I know it's 1 month and it really should be all year, but maybe hotlines, or maybe, hey, we're gonna put a sign at airports or in bathroom stalls or things like that. Hey, if you're being victimized or you're afraid, call this number, this hotline. And that, those little things, while they seem small, are really important because they take that time to try to educate society in a much bigger way.
It can take between 6 and 12 attempts for a victim to exit a sex trafficking situation. There are a lot of pieces that go into understanding why it takes a victim so many attempts. Part of it can be the trauma bond to the trafficker. It can be not having access to their identification, being undocumented, not having housing, struggling with a substance use disorder or a mental health diagnosis that's untreated. All of these factors come into combination. And so when a victim is trying to leave, they may not be able to do so successfully.
And there I stood alone and frozen, eyes glowing in the headlamps and caught in the light.
Everybody involved in money movement around the world, of course, they are regulated and they are mandated to know when there's illicit proceeds or dirty money flowing through their systems. There is no difference where that money comes from, drug trafficking or human trafficking or anything else, or tax evasion.
It's after the transactions get into an institution, if we're talking about banking specifically, and you start to see the placement of those funds and then the layering of those funds through wire payments or the payroll cards or just whatever products and services the institution has. And then the use and placement of those funds back in society, whether it's purchasing houses or cars or spending or however they're using those end funds. It's those transactional patterns that help you identify the money laundering portion of human trafficking.
We have a legal obligation to report suspicious transactions. And that means that the vast majority of the effort that financial institutions place on human trafficking work is looking for the proceeds of human trafficking. You know, if we applied the same sort of analogy to wildlife trafficking, we'd be looking for money that had been generated from killing elephants or pangolins, rather than trying to stop the elephants and the pangolins being killed in the first place. And so, to be good corporate citizens, the morally right thing to do is to try and identify victims of human trafficking before they're trafficked, or before they're exploited, or while they're vulnerable to trafficking and exploitation, so that we can take steps to ensure that we do everything we can to stop it.
You're trying to keep up with the spirit of the laws and implementing policies and controls that are going to identify and, you know, hopefully protect your institution from being, you know, part of a human trafficking element. But then it takes away from my ability, or like your ability to do more.
If there wouldn't be any limitations, if you, for example, criminal, would you think about your budget, your HR policies, about your kind of like privacy and all those kind of things? You have absolutely no blockers there. While when you have legitimate business, you have to think about a million things, to play by the book, to follow everything, to tick all the boxes. And it just slows us down as a society so much.
Email addresses, phone numbers, usernames, what we would refer to in our world as a pivot point. A piece of data that would allow you to continue looking into a subject of interest further. That's what you're looking for.
When we talk about investigations in the financial sector, we follow tips, we follow alerts that we come across. Now, some of those are generated from our own internal activities. We also have alerts or referrals which we pick up from law enforcement, who will send us matters to be investigated. We pick up stuff from the media, so we follow and track big stories. So if we see a story about human trafficking, and we work with a lot of charities and NGOs, non-government organizations, to raise awareness and to maintain awareness right the way through all of our banking operations.
We have a customer, we have account, we have transaction data within an institution. Everyone has that. But the data you need to really detect it, not just the transactional patterns and things like that, which we'll have, but the cell phone numbers, the emails, the web pages that are happening, or the postings, and just different things that are pulled by different organizations that were never accessible to our institutions. And even when we would get that data, it was very manual, and we would have to try to match up certain data points to our customers or our accounts and transactions.
New technologies are advancing so fast, and we should be able, as a society, to take advantage of that. Not just watching how criminals are doing that. They're the first ones who benefit from anything that comes out. COVID happens. The first ones who change their business model are criminals. They're very quick. AI happens. LLMs are out there. First, who utilizes that to change their business model? Criminals. So hey, we can do better. Absolutely, we can do better.
The biggest part about how trafficking has changed with technology is that it's happening at a scale we've never seen before. With regards to sex trafficking, we saw a lot of individuals who had never been in the commercial sex industry pushed into a place where they began engaging in the commercial sex trade because they had lost their jobs. The other thing that we saw during the pandemic was victims that were already being victimized were pushed more and more online because in-person interactions were not possible.
We know that social media is a vehicle that is used by traffickers to recruit and to exploit trafficked individuals. But we also know that they're not as engaged as an industry sector as they could be in tackling the problem. They're certainly not as engaged in sharing data and sharing information.
What we've really seen, particularly with the pandemic, is that a lot of exploitation and advertising of exploitation and recruitment of new victims starts on social media. So victims are being recruited en masse by traffickers who are sending mass messages to individuals on a social media platform, trying to engage them in conversation in that recruiting and grooming process. Victims most commonly experience complex PTSD, and the main symptoms are things like anxiety, depression, flashbacks, hypervigilance, panic attacks, loss of sleep. Another common mental health diagnosis that survivors of human trafficking have is dissociative identity disorder. And this is a more extreme version of dissociation where they may disconnect for a few moments or a few hours, up to a few days from their current reality. And this is a protective measure that a victim's body and brain activate when they are not physically able to leave a horrifically traumatizing situation.
You know, to be perfectly honest, I think anyone who works in this space is going to be impacted. I've had to see things that I can never unsee. It will never go away, no matter how hard I try.
I've been around trauma my entire life. Whether I was a kid growing up in a harsh environment with some parents who weren't exactly perfect, or in the military service, abroad, in combat, to now where I'm at, dealing with secondary trauma from, this horrific criminal activity. So it certainly has had an impact on how I view the world. It's definitely much more challenging to trust people because I know what people are capable of.
Those are the moments when you're the most alone, when you don't understand the world anymore. You just can't deal with cruelty, with all that evil for money, what people do to one another.
It's a struggle every single day. I mean, you're dealing with a problem as big as human trafficking with so much and broad scope. It's very easy to feel like you're alone.
If we want to joke about that, it's kind of you become terrible party guest. It's like, don't ask me what I do for work unless you want your night ruined.
I have to make sure to thoughtfully focus on or concentrate or identify points of light that do occur every day, whether that's found a kid and got him out of a bad situation, or we found a trafficker. Even if it's not an entire victory, you have to find a victory somewhere in there every day.
First of all, people who are involved in these types of jobs need to take care of themselves. Only then they can take care of anyone else. And working in that duty of care should be absolutely on top of the list of the things.
Everybody's different. Everybody's psyche is slightly different. Different people are impacted in different ways. So we never want to take for granted that people are not impacted, or just assume that they are, because some people can deal with this and are pretty strong and maybe don't need what others might. So I think just being cognizant, aware, sensitive is really important in this space.
Somebody asked me, would you change it if you, like Man in Black, if you would have that remote and somebody press the button and it's erased and you were like 5 or 6 years ago and you know, happy-go-lucky, know nothing about that. Would I go for that? And I had to think about it. And I was like, no, I don't think I would choose that, because I think knowing what really is going on, seeing that, really truly wanting to change that, to help people, it gives totally different dimension to your life.
If you ever wonder what you're doing, is it of value? Am I doing something important? Spend 5 minutes with a survivor, and you'll never ask that question again.
So looking for the indicators of human trafficking is probably the hardest piece. When we look at transactions, for example, all we have is lines of data. We expect transactions to behave in a certain way, and when they don't, when they break those rules, they generate an alert which gets investigated. But you can imagine, we just at Standard Chartered Bank, we process billions of transactions a year. Every single one of those transactions has to be scrutinized for anomalies, see whether or not it's breaking those rules that have been predetermined. So of course it's possible for the bad guys to game the system. It's possible for the bad guys to work out what is likely to generate an alert, what is likely to be considered an anomaly, and then behave accordingly.
Technology is great. Technology has done a wonderful job for the past 20 plus years since 9/11, and you've seen so many different of those things come in, but there's a lot of technology, and not one single technology is great for identifying, detecting human trafficking. It's a lot of blanket rules and coverage where once you get an alert, you have to then decide, is it human trafficking, is it drug trafficking, is it, what is it? Versus like persona-based or typology-based detection and monitoring, where you can, with a high degree of likelihood, know that that is probably a commercial sex brothel or it's child exploitation.
Somebody is sending $20 every other week to Philippines with having no relatives, no connections, nothing like that. Would any monitoring system pick that up? Probably not. It's like, why would you trace $20 to Philippines every other week? And then when you add the context, okay, there are other behaviors. There are kind of some kind of like VPN. There is some anonymization techniques. There is kind of lots of social media going on. There is gaming going on for somebody who is 50, 60 years old with no children. And then when you pull that all together, you see the picture. Okay, now those $20 to Philippines starting to make sense, because that's part of that profile, part of that persona who is very possibly watching live online child sexual exploitation videos.
When I see an account being opened, several names being utilized, I see that there's very little activity in those bank accounts. I see people buying airplane tickets to destinations, but then no other expenses, no meals being purchased, no travel being done. All of these kinds of things happening, and I can begin to see that these people are connected. Then because that happens within a connected network, it becomes a typology that's indicative of a type of human trafficking. So connecting the data together, using technology to understand what is the data telling me, that's how we're beginning to really make a difference, and the data is key to that.
The evolution of machine learning to a lesser extent AI, but we're beginning to see AI creep into this space, enables us to approach high volumes of alerts and triage those and determine which ones are genuinely anomalous and which ones need to be investigated. But then, of course, we've seen further evolution of technology of the sort that Red Compass has been developing with the Red Flag Accelerator, which brings a whole nother dimension to that, so that we're enriching that single line of data about a transaction with multiple data points about a client's behavior, which Red Compass is then able to map to known behavior typologies, and we're able to say with a higher degree of confidence whether these activities are likely to be suspicious or not.
Understanding how these organizations work, when you bring those typologies, you embed those in technology that can automatically then detect behavior. Now I'm detecting at a network level rather than an individual level. And if I can detect at a network level, I can take down the network much more quickly. If I can stop the money, if I can stop the activity, I can break the chains of the organization, then I can be much more impactful than I ever could in the past. So I think those are some of the things that have really made a difference in the fight against human trafficking.
When we've got law enforcement agencies and governments around the world trying to take down organized transnational criminal networks, the private sector is generally the best placed partner to give them the intelligence they need, but the infrastructure's not there to enable us to do it. So if I took information from country 3 and passed it to country 1 without country 3's permission, we'd be prosecuted by country 3 for breaching the rules of that country. And that causes a real challenge for us, as you might imagine. It causes a challenge for law enforcement as well, and for different governments. But for us, that's a real challenge, and that's something we've been working on with a number of different jurisdictions over the last 10 years. But we're not that much closer to fixing that yet.
As a species, as a collective species, human beings are incredible in and of themselves. We have brains, they're powerful, we can process information. But with a problem set as large as this one that involves so many other people, both victims and victimizers and grooming and facilitators and a financial environment that's all connected by technology, if we're not joining hands with other people in an effort to push back against that, you're losing the race before you even take off from the finish line.
Collaboration between institutions, and everyone would agree, is like the most important thing we've been trying to solve for as an industry across just financial crimes generally. I've learned so much from the Red Compass team and the ATI team that I had no idea. So if I don't know those things and I'm trying to do it on my own, and it could take me years maybe to even come close to understanding the things that they do, how can I be more effective, right, in fighting, this crime?
Only working together we can find the right ways how to share, what to share, because who said that we have to do only one thing and exactly the same way all over and over again? If we don't innovate and we don't change will never happen.
Today, technology has been a game changer. Technology has taken massive amounts of unimaginable data and brought it all together, and at scale and at speed, been able to sort through, connect it, build a network, and present that then to the investigators as a starting point, as opposed to starting way back here where they had to bring that together themselves.
One of your earlier questions was about, what was the environment when I first came into the private sector? And the environment was one of hostility, was a huge trust deficit between banks and law enforcement. And over the last 10 years, we've closed that deficit. We now work very, very closely in a number of jurisdictions, directly alongside law enforcement, providing real-time intelligence about people that they're interested in from their bank account activity. And that enables law enforcement to get closer to the bad guys quicker, but it also enables them to identify victims quickly and rescue victims quickly before they suffer too much harm.
It's changing. I'm looking at some of my peer institutions and being no longer in banking, but really connected to the people that are there. There's some institutions that are really putting themselves out there. They're working with local hospitals, local government, local law enforcement. They're trying to change laws within their state. These are banks. These are Bank Secrecy Act officers and financial crimes individuals that are doing this. They're creating grants for trauma nurses and education within different hotels or motels and things like that. So when I see that, I'm like, that is amazing. And I get chills even thinking about, these are people I know that care as much as I do, but figured out a way to do more and overcome those challenges, right? So it's getting better. There's still a lot of them, but it's really encouraging to see how we as an industry are trying to say, you know what, no more. We know we need to do more, and we're gonna go do more.
Carry my friend to the mountains, misty and cold in the night dark. Carry my friend and lay her down under the moonbeams. Is there room enough for two beside you?
Do you think it's hard?
I don't think it'll ever go away because unfortunately, there's an aspect to humankind that always seems to want to exploit others, exploit weakness. But if we can continue to work and work harder, continue to use technology, continue to rally, the support together, we are making a difference. And so, yes, there's always hope as long as people are not giving up, as long as they're continuing to fight, as long as they are committed to making a difference.
The fact that we've got over the denial that there are literally millions of victims of trafficking around the world, and we've accepted that point, and that we are working together to try and tackle it, that gives us great hope. And those people who are victims, there is hope that we will make a contribution to identifying them and ultimately liberating them. So I'm definitely glass half full in that context.
My hope is one day I wake up and we are at 99%. And I don't know if that's possible at all in my lifetime. I don't know. But you can hope, right? You can take that away from me. Nobody. I can hope that we will dramatically change this.
The misnomer out there in the world or in general is that to catch something big, you have to have something big to catch it with, and that's not entirely true. These are people like you and me that think a lot of times the same way. Sometimes they're lazy, sometimes they don't want to spend the extra time, sometimes they're forgetful or don't think long-sighted enough, don't have the hindsight. So that error, that one error, is all it takes. And for this particular case we're talking about, that one error was an email addressed on an articles of incorporation for one business. That's all it took. That's where it started.
My name is Megan Lundstrom. I am a mother, an entrepreneur, a college graduate, and I've been the CEO of a national organization. Today, I am the director of the Resilience Fund at Polaris, a brand new direct cash assistance program for survivors of human trafficking across the US. And I'm also a survivor of human trafficking. The data and research you just heard are real, but without the context, without knowing the human side of it, it has no meaning. And that's one reason why stories are so important. Without knowing the human side of trafficking, you can end up prosecuting the victims rather than the true perpetrators. It's time to listen to survivors. Let us help with the context of the data. Support us rather than exclude us. And let's ask all companies involved in this chain, from social media to payment and payment technology providers to governments, for more transparency, accountability, and action.
The call to arms is for more and more collaboration, for us to work with governments to remove the legal barriers that enable organized criminals to operate with impunity, and for us to share the information with the partners that we need to, who are closest to the victims.
This is a data problem. That means you need the right technology. The technology is available. Give your people the tools they need. If you don't, then we become complicit in the problem, because we can make a difference. So law enforcement, get the right tools. Banks, empower your teams with the right tools, give them the right training, help them understand what they're looking for, and allow them to make a difference so they can give meaningful information to law enforcement so that they can begin to tie those things together.
Pull your head out of the sand. Pay attention. Recognize the value of human beings to your left and right, and even people that aren't in your near vicinity or near your location or in your culture or ethnic group, but human beings in general, their value. And that one change will have an impact across the entirety of the globe, because people will start caring.
Don't be afraid to ask a question or ask to do more. People are not going to say no in this space. It is a hard thing to do for people to sometimes want to ask a question for fear of rejection, fear of whatever it is. But especially in the anti-human trafficking space, if you are interested in this and you want to do more and you want to make an impact, find someone. It could be me, it could be Aaron Collar from ATI, it could be Sylvia from Red Compass, it doesn't matter, anybody. Reach out to anybody in those organizations and they'll point you in the right direction if they can't help you.
Join us. Do this awareness. Tell your children, tell your parents, tell your grandparents these things that are happening to everybody. There's nothing to be ashamed about. You should protect your children, telling them there are terrible things that do happen in the internet. If you're a financial institution, there are so many things we can do for you, save your time. If you're an ML platform, so many things we can share with you. Survivors, we want to hear your stories. We want to bake them into their personas and profiles and flags. Just let's share more, let's do more. Like today, let's start right now.
Myself in situations when no one else in shock would ever go. And there I stood